God.
Let's do this thing.
Let's do this.
Christina was super fired up before, and my goal for this episode is to get her half as fired up as she was before. Oh my gosh.
So
Okay,
there's
so
that.
speaking of things to get comfortable and uncomfortable about, this week we wanted to talk about something that we see very frequently in our practices, and we see a lot of also on the interwebs, on the line, as Christina likes to say.
That is a reference to a movie. I'll just let everyone know that's from The Internship, where Owen Wilson and Vince Vaughn they're like unemployed salespeople and they go and intern at Google.
Oh, man. Okay, so
Oh, God. Okay.
what we wanted to get into is the topic of, are you looking for permission to restrict? Which might be a little uncomfy for a lot of people. Speaking of uncomfy and misinformation that we're seeing online, or let's see, misdirecting information that we're seeing online, we also wanted to plug, we did a deep dive on protein on last week's bonus Patreon episode, so we will link that in the show notes.
Yeah.
But yeah, let's get into, are you looking for permission to restrict?
I think this might be kind of hard for people a little bit. Not that it's like hard for you to comprehend, but more of a ew, am I? Because I think, to be honest, I don't want you to listen to this episode and be like, oh my God, I am. And then therefore, like, there's something wrong with me and I now have an eating disorder. Like, slow down, guys.
No.
That's not necessarily what we're saying. Also, we don't diagnose people with eating disorders. Speak to your therapist or your doctor about that. Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. That does not happen here. But I think it's like almost like people tend to be crowdsourcing ways to pull back on how much they're eating. I think that's ultimately what we're talking about today, and being able to gently and lovingly call yourselves out for that and reflect a little bit around what that looks like. Because I think the truth is we are constantly outsourcing information about our bodies because we've been taught not to trust them for our entire lives. I mean, if you think about the first time you ever started any kind of nutrition education, it was usually around listen to this, not to yourself, about food. And we've been constantly told that we can't. So it makes sense that you would be seeking out crowdsourcing ideas about how you're supposed to eat. I think a lot of people can relate to this. But one of the things that we want to talk about today is that sense of crowdsourcing is really just a way for you to look for permission to restrict certain food groups or food items ultimately. And if that is the case, what do we do about it? How do we change that narrative?
We also want to touch on, like, why are we looking for permission to restrict and where are we looking for permission to restrict? And we'll give you a couple of examples there. But like Christina was saying, when we have been taught that we can't trust our bodies, we're going to look outside for information because we also don't know how to interpret the signals that our bodies are giving us. And at so many points in our lives, I mean, even in our schooling, which we'll get into later, a lot of the time, especially if you have any kind of functional slant to your training or the information that you take in or integrative, restriction in different forms is always presented as the solution to fixing something.
Oh, 100%.
It's, do this elimination diet for thyroid, or, do Whole30, or, do this sugar detox, right? And the line between, is this a weight loss prescriptive diet or is this a quote therapeutic elimination protocol to fix my symptoms is very thin, my friends. And most of the time, it's both. And it's interesting. And I think this is where part of the idea for this episode came from is I was thinking back to when I first got diagnosed with celiac disease, when I was seeing a functional medicine provider almost 15 years ago at this point.
Did I get diagnosed before you or around the exact same time?
Well, we didn't know each other then.
That's true. That's true. We didn't. We met like a year or two later, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
But so I was thinking back to that. And mind you, this is also deep in the eating disorder days. So take this with a grain of salt. But I remember going into that practitioner and not necessarily thinking consciously of like, oh my God, I would love if they just told me not to eat X, Y, and Z, because it basically gives the stamp of approval of you can continue restricting,
Yeah.
but it's for a good reason. And it was so interesting because I've recently gotten access to a bunch of those old labs, and I was like, oh my God, they were running so many different things on me, because you're constantly, when you're having a lot of health issues, you're looking for the reason, right? Like you're
Totally.
looking for a diagnosis, or you're looking for some kind of pattern that is happening that's like, oh, this is why these symptoms are coming up in my body, or this is why my body has changed, or this is why this has happened to me. And when you have a background in any kind of naturopathic, functional medicine, not neutral nutrition, like anything other than neutral nutrition training, whether it's weight or symptoms, the answer or the proposed solution to your problem that's going on in your body is, oh, well, just get rid of a bunch of things and it'll fix it. And whether that's weight off of your body or food to change what is going on in your body, we're told, oh, yeah, this is the answer. And if you don't get to the answer that you're looking for by restricting, whether that's restricting your weight or restricting your food, it's then actually flipped on you, and it seems like a you problem rather than the protocol that you were given.
Yeah, it's very shame-based, right? And one of the things that I was thinking about too, and even just all of our training, everything has always been down to, well, this is a symptom and here's how food can change that. And most of the time, people, and I've noticed this like when I worked in the functional medicine doctor's office, most of the times, if I were telling people to, if I try to increase people's variety of food, oh my God, the amount of pushback that I would get on me to the doctor, like literally, there's a client who told on me, he's like, your nutritionist is telling people to eat cupcakes. I'm like, you need to relax. Like, that's what I was trying to tell you. I wasn't telling you to make your main diet staple just cupcakes all day. I told you to relax and enjoy a cupcake every now and again. I think a lot of times at the heart of it is we don't consider the idea that healing can come from adding in. We consider healing as coming from something that we have to take away. And I think that's really sad, that so much of the narrative is that we have to take something away in order to feel better, when really we should be thinking about adding more and like thinking about it more from like an abundance and supportive standpoint than it is from a pulling back. I think the thing that makes it really hard for people too to identify with the idea about, am I looking for permission to restrict, is because a lot of times it's not considered restriction. They don't think about it as restriction. They think about it as like, oh, I'm taking out this thing that's causing harm. And it's like, well, is it that thing that's causing harm? Maybe. Or is it the lack of things around it that are actually the thing that are throwing some fuel on the flames? And so for me, the difference between the restrictive shame-based approach that Dana was describing, where it's like, oh, I have to fix my body, there's something wrong, I need to take things away, versus I want to empower myself with more sustainable behaviors and I want to support my body long term, are very, very different internal narratives about how we're approaching food. And I think it's really hard for people to shift that mindset because of how much we've been told that we can't trust our bodies and that everything that we're doing is wrong and we need to do something different and we need to take out all these things in order to feel better. I think about every news segment there ever is, like every couple of weeks, it's like some new, like, this food item is toxic. And it's like, oh my God, just add it to the list of things to be scared of and to take away from you. And we don't think of that as restriction, but it is inherently restrictive.
Hmm. And one thing that we want to be clear on is this is not just for people who have diagnosed eating disorders.
Oh, no.
Yes, it obviously happens to people with diagnosed eating disorders or who are in the throes of disordered eating behaviors, but this happens to everybody. I have
Mhm.
never worked with a client for whom this is not at least part of the equation for them. And of course, disclaimer, when we're going back to what Christina was saying about maybe removing things will fix things. Of course, in the case of something like celiac, food allergies, even if you're lactose intolerant. But
Totally.
you guys know I work with a lot of GI clients, right? And so what I always say is most of the time when you're having food reactions, barring those examples that I just gave, the food is not the problem. There's something else going on that is causing you to have these reactions to food, whether that's GI, skin, hair, hormones, whatever it is. But removing those foods is not going to fix the problem. We need to figure out where the problem is coming from. And a lot of the time, the problem is coming from over restriction. If you listen to our episode on protein, we talk about the female athlete triad and low energy availability, or red S. And I think we'll have to get into that in a whole nother episode. But basically, if you are a person who exercises consistently or trains in any form, doesn't mean that you're a high school athlete like a bunch of the ones that I work with, or doing CrossFit or any of this, and you are under eating for your body's needs, the more that this happens over a long period of time, the more you're going to start to have hormonal imbalances, maybe start missing your period. Is it perimenopause or is it low energy availability? You're going to have GI issues, you're going to have cholesterol issues, you're going to have all this other stuff. Crazy that can happen just from not eating enough, but it's true. And so even though we're always taught, oh, the answer is like just eat less, it's not. Most of the time, it's the other way around.
Well, I think the narrative is shifting a little bit. Maybe I'm wrong, but I feel like the narrative is shifting a little bit from eat less versus eat the right things. And I think we sometimes, right? Like, I think we sometimes forget.
Just make sure you eat enough protein.
Yeah, just eat 300 grams of protein. Don't do that.
We're laughing
guys.
so that we don't cry.
Yeah, don't do that, guys. That's terrible. But also, I think now that's what makes it difficult to discern between, is this restrictive versus is this health promoting? Because sometimes when you're hearing something, you might think to yourself, well, that's not restrictive because they're adding something in, or I'm eating more of this thing. But what is the takeaway? Is the takeaway that I shouldn't be eating sugar or these quote unquote inflammatory things, and I need to eat more of these anti-inflammatory things, and that is the approach? And is that inherently restrictive because we're creating a morality and a restriction around certain food groups? The answer is yes. We might not realize it or think about it that way because it seems like it's not coming from this place. This is where you're going to find the people who are like, oh, I'm not dieting. Like, I'm a non-diet nutritionist. But the reality is they have super, super hierarchy and morality around food choices. And that is where you're going to start to see that. There's a huge difference between, here, I am having low energy and I want to support myself with basic nutrition education and understand how does my body respond to sugar, versus we got to cut out sugar. Sugar's inflammatory. That's why you have low energy. Bing, 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 bing. Like, that's the huge difference between those two places. Whereas the person might say, oh, I'm not restrictive. You can eat as much as you want, as long as it's not Snickers. And then what happens when you go and have a Snickers, you feel like crap. And you're like, oh, this is why I don't feel good. And it's all my fault. And this is where this all comes from. But I think it's like, to me, I think sometimes even now it's hard to differentiate what is restrictive and what isn't restrictive, because the narrative is so thinly veiled now, because people know, like, hey, we're not trying to promote anorexia, but ultimately we're promoting behaviors that can be a quick slippery slope towards something like that.
Yeah. And that's what we want to get into next, because I love that you brought up the what do we want to call them? The non-diet nutritionist posers, maybe? What we mean by that is there are people who firmly believe that they are non-diet because they are not handing out paleo, Whole30, sugar detox, whatever. This does not mean that they are neutral nutrition. I have met and worked with many of them. They firmly believe that there are better foods than other ones, and that inflammatory foods and processed foods and, whatever is on their list of good versus bad foods are at the root of a lot of health problems. And just because they're not handing out diets like candy doesn't mean that they are non-diet. What they're doing is just another version of a diet. They're just not calling it that. It's not a diet. It's a lifestyle change. Okay, Whole30.
It's giving real Maha vibes. Just throwing that out there. But
that is another episode I want to do, Christina.
That will be a whole nother episode, but it's giving Maha to me because there is a hierarchy, right? And I think this episode isn't to throw shade at anybody or say that everything like what they're doing is wrong. I'm not in agreement
No,
with
it's to
Maha,
steer clear.
but I'm gonna make that very clear. But it's more of for you to understand how can I discern for myself and make an informed choice around what is inherently restrictive and what is actually inherently empowering and educational and helping me build sustainable health promoting behaviors for myself versus I have to eat a certain way, do certain things, and then all of my health problems are going to be solved. If someone is telling you that, run. Don't walk, run in the opposite direction. Because before you know it, you're going to be recommended snake venom and like wondering what the hell's going on. True story, guys. True story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Okay.
is
So
this
let's get
inherently
into
is this inherently restrictive?
Yes, let's get into a couple of the different places where you may intentionally or not intentionally be looking for permission to restrict, slash, just examples of stuff that we see out on the line. And then we're also going to talk about how some of these can be interpreted in a neutral way,
Totally.
although that's not the norm, I would say. And then what is the slippery slope with this information? So the first place we want to go, because these are so popular, what is happening? Why are we going back 15 years ago to what I eat in a day posts, like low-rise jeans, all of this craziness, okay? All of the blogger trends from 2010 are back in 2025, okay? So the first thing that we're seeing so much of, which, like, to be fair, I don't think this really ever went away, but it's just coming back with a vengeance, is these what I eat in a day posts. Now, the devil's advocate here is if you are following a recipe developer, if you're following a professional chef, and you're like, whoa, this is so interesting. I wonder how a professional chef is able to eat through their 12-hour workday or whatever. Informational. Or if you're looking at, for example, like a recipe developer or a food blogger, and they're like, here's what I eat in a day, and these are the different recipes that I'm developing. Cool. Maybe you're getting some recipe ideas. The slippery slope is when these people are like, this is exactly what I eat in a day in order to achieve this body type, and here's all my macros, and you can do it too. Everyone take a deep breath.
Well, the truth is, I think what's hard is that it's alluring, right? And to be honest, it's aesthetically
We've all
pleasing.
fallen
They
for
make
it.
beautiful food posts. I totally get it. And I also really love it for ideas for things to prepare for myself. I think the problem is when all of a sudden we're hit down this road of, oh, and here's what I do to maintain my body size. Then we're going to look at, okay, well, one, the questions start rolling in. Was this what your body size always was, or did you change it? Is this what you did to change your body size, or is this how it's always been? And then all the questions start happening. It was like, oh, well, if I follow what they're doing, maybe I'll look like them. Is that what they're telling me? Is that what the narrative is? And then inherently that becomes restrictive because the idea of restriction here with these eat what I eat in a day, it gives you the sense that this is what you're supposed to be eating in order to look a certain way, i.e., look like them. What's particularly difficult about this is that a lot of people compare what they eat to what other people eat. This is also a huge thing that happens in disordered eating patterns and in eating disorders where they don't feel comfortable eating something unless they see what other people are doing. This is like when we size up the room at the menu when everyone's ordering dinner. What's everyone getting? It's like almost giving yourself a permission slip to do that. That's a huge difference between physical restriction, whereas I'm not allowing myself to eat stuff anymore, and the concept of mental restriction, where I'm going to mentally cut off these things, meaning I shouldn't be eating these things versus I can eat all things are welcome here. And so to me, I think sometimes that's where what I eat in a day can become that slippery slope because it inherently builds in this idea of here's a permission slip I'm comparing to other people about what I should and shouldn't be eating. And that creates the concept of mental restriction, which is a huge feeder for a lot of people in the concept of restriction, which leads to the restrict binge cycle over and over again. too. And that's why we end up in this cycle over and over and over again. So what you might think is super innocent, oh, cool, I'm just looking to see what they had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and I'm going to make cool different stuff. And the next thing you know, it's like you're getting hit in their highlights called their wellness journey. And the next thing you know, you're like, holy crap, here I am. And now you have a list of things that you're feeling, well, if I don't eat like that, something's wrong, or I should be eating like that. And that builds mental restriction. I think one of the things also that makes this really difficult too is I think it's important for people to consider the narrative that you're feeding into yourself when you're looking at these things too. The question that I want people to ask themselves is, of the people that you're following, what do they look like? I'm very curious why you're taking this person so seriously versus someone else. And I think that everyone can read between the lines here a little bit, but I'm gently trying to question of why are we taking this person versus someone else? Would you take someone else walking through what they were eating in a day as seriously as you are with this person? And this is to be like a little bit of a devil's advocate, because I think a lot of the times the answer might be maybe not, probably not, absolutely not, depending on who you are. And that's a question for you to ask yourself. But I think that's a really important thing to check yourself when you're seeing what I eat in a day video, to question yourself and ask, would I feel the same way if this person looked differently? Would I take their advice as seriously? Would I say to myself, I need to adopt this because they're showing this now? I think asking those questions is going to give you a lot of insight around whether or not you are looking for permission to do what they're doing so that you can be like them, look like them, and do and have the quote unquote results that they are having, right? Whatever that means to them. That's like a whole nother can of worms. But in our minds, that's what that looks like to us. And so I'm saying this for everybody out there. The what I eat in the day videos are an incredible slippery slope for a lot of people. Because usually what ends up happening is you see someone doing what I eat in a day, they're already under eating. You have absolutely no idea what their nutritional input is like, what they're
Or
actually,
even if they're eating what they're saying
I
they're
know,
eating.
even if they're eating it, right? You have absolutely no idea. And then what we do, if we have a history of disordered eating patterns or body image stuff or things like this, or we want to have weight loss associated with certain types of behaviors, we're going to see what they're doing. And we're like, well, I'm going to do it better. I'm going to do less because I want to be smaller. I need to lose weight. They're maintaining, right? Like that's the language that we're using out there. They're maintaining. So I need to do less if I want to eat, if I want to lose weight or have the results that I want to have. This is where it becomes a slippery slope. And then next thing you know, it's permission to restrict. You're looking for permission to restrict, whether or not it's intentional or not. The impact is that it ends up being restriction, whether it's mental
Another place where
restriction
we
or physical restriction. Yeah.
Another place where we see this a lot is in these therapeutically designed protocols / recommendations by health condition. This is one of the most epidemic things, I would say, we're seeing in the nutrition world online these days. The PCOS girlies, the perimenopause girlies, the protein girlies, like all these different things, right? And I think this has really exploded with TikTok because it's so easy to get into a rabbit hole of as soon as you like something, they're showing you 10 more things on your For You page about that specific topic. And so this one is a particularly hard one because if you identify with some of the things that the person on the other side of the phone is talking about, like you do have PCOS and maybe you're also going through perimenopause and maybe you also have all these other things, you might think, oh, this one is actually way more applicable to me than these random people who are doing what I eat in a day videos because, well, they don't have PCOS or they don't have, or they're not going through perimenopause or they don't have, you know, whatever your check list of health things, lifestyle things going on is. But the thing is, when somebody, and coming from someone who's been creating content on the internet for
12 years.
almost 11 years at
I was
this
gonna
point.
say 12 years or something.
When you are creating content, it is for a general audience, even if it is for a specific health condition. Because there's no way that you could possibly know the exact dietary recommendations, macronutrients, blah, 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 for every single person who has Hashimoto's thyroiditis. There's no way. There's no possible way, even though that's a very small subset of the population in comparison to everybody else. We could even go more narrow. Women between 30 and 35 who have Hashimoto's thyroiditis and have whatever. Still, general for that group of people. Are there going to be more specific recommendations than for the general public? Sure. But that doesn't mean that you need to comply with those or you're going to make your health condition worse. And it's very easy to fall into that slippery slope. And so please don't take health or diet advice from strangers on the internet. That is the moral of this story for today.
Totally. But the thing also, I think what's hard about that though is like what you're talking about with these therapeutic protocols and the PCOS girlies and all of the girlies. The problem is that historically we go to the doctor, we feel like we're sharing what's going on and we're saying, "Oh, your labs are okay." There's so many reels just about that alone that it makes sense that you're drawn to these videos, drawn to finding out what's going on, deciding to yourself, like, maybe I'll just try all of them. Like, why not try it? Maybe like I'm throwing darts at the wall and hoping one sticks kind of vibe. Like hoping that something happens and you're desperate for change and wanting support and you feel lost because no one's offering it to you. Totally valid. It makes complete sense. The red flags that I am going to share is that when we have these types of things, I would want you to look at what the person is claiming
And where their education is
and
also.
where their education is. Where are they getting this information from? Is this something, and to remember for yourself, this is what's helping them. They do not know my unique body. They do not know what's going on with my unique body. I don't even really know everything that might be going on with my unique body. We have symptoms and we have things going on and we're trying to manage that and trying to figure it out, but we don't have all of the pieces of the puzzle either. So I can't take everything that this person is saying verbatim. Like I can't take everything and take that. The thing that's so alluring and where you can see, am I looking for permission to restrict? Is this person claiming something they have no control over? They have no control over how a health promoting behavior is going to be impacted in your body. They don't. They can't tell you that. And if they are telling you that, you need to remind yourself, this is information. This is something that I could try if I wanted to try it, but let me check in with myself and see, am I looking for ways to restrict things in my life? Or by adding on certain stuff and overwhelming my system with so many different things too, right? And I think that's important to kind of recognize and to call out and look, because then you can look at yourself and reflect, and we're going to get into some reflection questions too. But I think those are the things to kind of notice and say, what is this person claiming? And do they have control over that? Or are they trying to sell me something?
This honestly might be one of my favorite things that Christina has ever said when we were planning for this episode.
Oh my God.
Because we were talking about, quote, nutritionists at the gym after a client session that I had earlier this week. And Christina goes, here's the problem with these people versus, these, quote, nutritionists at the gym versus people like us who are coming from a non-diet approach and understand that what your body does with health promoting behaviors is none of our business. She goes, one person is claiming something that they have absolutely no control over, and the other one is sitting in reality. And that's where
I forgot that I said that.
But yeah. But here's the thing. I
was on a rampage when I said it, but I still believe it wholeheartedly. I totally agree with that. So all of this is really to say the things that you're looking at and things that you're seeing online, I want you guys to think about this with the healthy sense of skepticism. I was a former auditor, and so I can't help myself. And that's literally how we went into every project, like trust but verify, right? Like we want to trust the things and the people that we're seeing information from, and we don't want to think that they're like shitty, terrible people. I don't think that everyone's crappy, terrible people trying to make a buck off of you. I don't think that. My idea and the whole concept that we had around this episode was for you guys to go into these things with a little bit more eyes wide open and self-reflection to notice, why am I drawn to these therapeutic protocols? Why am I drawn to what do I eat in a day video? Why am I drawn to the nutritionist at the gym who looks real snatched and I want to do what they're doing? Like, and what they're telling me to do. Why am I like so drawn to these things? And to reflect a little bit about, I am drawn to those things because there is a part of me that is looking for permission to restrict or pull back or have permission to not eat certain foods so that I feel better. Right. And so that I can have the results that I want to have, and so that I can have control over my food. Right. And there's a huge difference between that and between, I want to educate myself, understand what my body's needs are, and support myself. There's a huge difference. And the thing is that we want you to reflect a little bit on yourself of, why do I take those videos and those people more seriously than others? And in that honest conversation with yourself, you might start to see and start to be able to reflect a little bit. Am I looking for permission to restrict? What are some things that, like, why am I looking for permission to restrict potentially? Why do I feel like I have to follow food rules? Why do I feel like I always have to be pulling back or restricting food in order to heal my body and to feel better? How do I feel when I don't follow my rules and these things that I'm doing? And then ultimately, like, the ultimate question is, what are some things that we mentioned in this episode that you may not have thought of as restrictive in tendencies, right? And I think that those are the things that we want you to get from today's episode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think maybe in the continuation of this on Patreon, we're going to break the fourth wall a little bit and talk about our experience in working with functional medicine and what this actually looks like from a practitioner standpoint, because that's a lot.
Yeah.
But some other things that I want to leave you guys with is, so we have a whole episode called Can You Manage Chronic Health Conditions Without Restriction, which is a really good also continuation of this episode, specifically for like managing symptoms and managing chronic health conditions without having to do restrictive protocols. So I will link that in the show notes. And don't forget to check out our protein episode on Patreon from last week if you're interested.
Bye.